Welcome to the first episode of the From the Spot podcast. Today we've got Owen, Luke, Lucas, and myself. We're going to talk through some of the biggest sporting stories of this week and look forward to next weekend's football. I think we'll start off with everything that's going on at Chelsea. Obviously, they've just signed Mykhailo Mudryk for 100 million. So, Luke, as a Chelsea fan, how do you feel about that? Is there actually an investment strategy there, or are they just going for everyone else's targets?
There's been considerable noise in the press at recent times that it's Todd Bowley's strategy just to basically play Football Manager with his new club that he's bought. But for me, I think yes, there's been some hiccups in terms of some of the signings, particularly back in last summer when you think about some of the players were invested in, especially when it was clear at the time that Tuchel was the man they wanted. They've kind of not really hit the ground running, and there's definitely a point to say that before the January window, and even after some of the signings we've made now, that there clearly didn't feel like there was any sort of direction. But I think the restructuring that they've done over the last few weeks, bringing in the new guys at top of the head of recruitment, like Vival and Joe Shields, those sorts of people, has really kind of, for me as a fan, made me think, okay, what we're looking to do here is, yes, we might be paying extortionate amounts of money on, as you say, Mudryk as well, usurping Arsenal to the purchase by giving them an extra 5 million and a ridiculous 8.5 year contract. But I think the idea is very much we're not going to be waiting around in any transfer window anymore. We might not be as ruthless potentially as we were under Abramovich, but there is clearly a sense now of if a player fits a mould, we'll make sure that we can get them in. And going forward, it's very much looking to eliminate a lot of the high earners, older players that are kind of just sitting around, have been involved in the squad since back in the Sarri days, really. There's a few players that I can kind of think of that probably shouldn't still be at the club, and there has been talk of maybe renewing their contracts for another year just because of their experience. But for me, I really think we've got to invest in the youth and spending money on players like Mudryk and Andre Santos, who we've signed from the Brazilian league. I can sort of see the long-term vision of it, but I understand, as you say, like where it does seem a little bit scattergun at times.
Chelsea didn't really express any interest in Mudryk until we'd seen Arsenal doing it, and it does make you wonder, are they even doing their own scouting, really, of the big names at this point, or is it simply just relying on other clubs to pick up the talent and then hijack those deals?
I suppose you've got to look at it from the point of view of the background for the new ownership is very much business centric. They are American businessmen, and it's very much a point of trying to do negotiations and deals in a way that isn't very maybe football friendly. I know there's been a lot of reports where a lot of owners and a lot of managers for other clubs are privately a little bit taken aback by the bolshiness of Bowley in negotiations. So I can look at it from the point of view of potentially we weren't scouting him, but the reports have said that Graham Potter was very keen on the player. He does seem to fit a mould of a player that we're currently lacking. We haven't got a lot of dynamism and creativity in the midfield. We can look quite one-dimensional in build-up sometimes, which is clear by the poor run of form we've been on for the last couple of months. I think it's a worthwhile investment, but as you say, with the prior planning, was it there or not? It could have just been a case of let's see how much Shakhtar Donetsk are willing to requiring for a club to pay to accept the transfer, and then we'll just go in with a slightly higher offer. So it allows another recruitment team to do all the legwork while we are monitoring it in the background, and then we can pip them to the post right at the last minute, a la transfers such as Willian in the past when he was in Tottenham's training ground, and then we pulled him over to sign for Chelsea.
I mean, you're still going forward, you're still linked with, is it Thuram and Noni Madueke from PSV? I mean, the attacking depth is already quite good, apart from in that central forward role. So is signing Madueke even going to help? Because it's just adding more depth to an already very deep part of the squad.
Yeah, I mean, you're right, very much so. I think the glaring omission we have in our squad is a strong number 9 who is there to lead the line and has the experience of the Premier League. That sort of player. I personally think the clamour for Mitrovic is something that I would very much be supportive of to sign a player of that sort of ilk to lead our line. We're crying out for the presence of an Olivier Giroud, who is still doing very well over in Serie A for AC Milan, and I think yes, we've signed for Fana, who is a really good prospect. We had Broja, unfortunately, out with the season-ending injury, and I think a lot of Potter's plans were to build around him. It's very clear that Aubameyang is not the answer and isn't really wanted in the club, from what I can understand and sort of grasp, especially with being subbed on and subbed off in the game. I think it was the week before last, which is something you don't really do with a player of his kind of age and career record. It's very unheard of for a player like that to be brought on and then subbed off, and to keep the trust in a player like that. So I think there is a lot of kind of questions as to who's going to lead the line, particularly when we've relied so heavily on Havertz in weeks, and he's been very kind of hit and miss. I still think there's a very good player in there somewhere, but it's now coming up to his third year with us, and we still don't know his best position. So a centre forward is definitely kind of a position we probably should sort of prioritise. There's talks of Vlahovic as well coming in from Juventus, but I don't know. I mean, especially as we've now got the hush confirmed signing of Nkunku from Leipzig, who I imagine will probably be more of a central player for us, but more of that false nine sort of role with your wingers like Mudryk or Sterling or João Felix, if he was to stay on, bombing on the wide areas of the pitch. So it's a sort of watch this space element, because I don't know what the answer is at the moment. I'm sure they've got someone in mind, but you never know. They could come in and try and bid 200 million for Haaland next summer. It could be something like that.
Yeah, I mean, moving across London, Arsenal found themselves quite surprisingly at the top of the Premier League with, what is it, an 8-point gap now over Man City? Man City they haven't been poor, but they're not up to their usual standards. Do you think, Lucas, that they could carry on their form and win the league this season, or is it Arsenal's for the taking?
I don't know, and part of me sort of wants to say City get it, and then when Arsenal win, then it's all that much better. But I don't know. I think the thing that's pushed Arsenal on so far is Zinchenko and Jesus. They've got the experience of winning the league, they've got the composure, and it scares me a bit that City have a full squad of that.
Yeah, that's the thing, because City's squad is very much well-rounded, isn't it? Do you know what I mean? They've got 9 out of 10s, 10 out of 10s in pretty much every position. Arsenal don't have that. But Arteta's learnt from Pep. He spent years as his understudy. Do you think that maybe the reason you're at the top of the league now is because of Arteta and what he's picked up from Pep at Man City?
Yeah, definitely. Like, even his involvement in the recruitment has got us where we are now. Pep's even said himself that he's a bit shaky with Arsenal. I mean, Arteta, he's completely revolutionised the side, but I think at the same time, the players that we've got, they shouldn't really be where they are. The fact that we're 8 points clear with the likes of Eddie and Nketiah up front, like, I think it's Arteta's man management which has took us so far. Like, we all know he's got the tactical side of it, but to be able to get Eddie Nketiah with so much confidence, like looking like he's going to score goals against Spurs and Newcastle, when we didn't see that under even Unai Emery, Eddie Nketiah wasn't great at all, and that's the same for many other players.
Arteta seems really composed and calm, doesn't he, at the top of the league? Whereas, now Man City aren't top, and even only in second. Pep Guardiola seems to have completely lost his confidence. I mean, I was at his press conference ahead of the Manchester derby, and he seemed really shaky and almost already defeated before the game had even kicked off. Do you think maybe Arteta has got that level of confidence that's going to prove crucial at the end of the season?
Yeah, I'm surprised by Arteta's confidence. He's not had a management role since joining Arsenal, but I do like that about him, and I think that brings confidence to the players. We saw it in All or Nothing. Like, they definitely get inspired by his well, let's say dodgy pep talks, um but yeah, the players. Arteta is the reason, like, why we are here, and I think Pep's probably crying that he's joined us and not stayed with them.
I mean, if we move up north now to Liverpool, there's talk of Arab investment, which is a bit of a shock. But at the same time, should it be expected with, the likes of Newcastle being taken over by the Saudi Public Investment Fund and PSG's ownership? Owen, what's your thoughts on that?
Well, yeah, I think it's sort of the old typical homage of, if you can't beat them, join them. All these clubs now, they are spending millions and millions, and whether it comes from Arab investors or United States businessmen like in Chelsea with Todd Bowley, I think the money in football now is only going to get a larger and larger playing card, if you will. So I think as a Liverpool fan myself, I will welcome new owners. I think it's time for FSG to move on. They've done what they've needed to do. They've come in and they've, you can't say they were bad owners because we've returned to the top of the footballing world after a very, very mediocre few years. But yeah, I think the potential ownership of Qatari state-funded backers would definitely be something I'd welcome in the club personally, but I know that could be quite a controversial opinion.
Yeah, I mean, do you think that maybe it will get slated for, selling the club's identity, because Liverpool is traditionally a very working man city and proud of its roots? Do you think that maybe selling that to the Middle East kind of goes against everything that the city stands for?
Well, yeah, obviously the city has always been at the heart of its identity is that working man, the blue collar, hard-working man, trying to make his way in the world. But the culture of the club is obviously important, and it is important to all the fans worldwide. But like I said, if you don't keep up, you'll get left behind. And you see with the money being spent by Chelsea, Manchester City, Manchester United, and obviously Newcastle now with their Saudi investors, it's a fact of if Liverpool don't start spending money like that, it will be where we are now. We're sitting in 9th position at the moment, somewhere that no one expected us or wanted us to be. And I think without investment, without, £250 million being put into that midfield, we're not going to keep up, and we're not going to, maintain the standards that we've kept alongside City for the last 5-6 seasons.
Yeah, I suppose the lack of investment's kind of already showing from FSG with, the dire situation that the midfield's in at the moment. I mean, Liverpool has struggled since they sold Gini Wijnaldum last summer. Do you think that maybe Trent in midfield would work well to provide the creativity that, you've been missing since his departure?
It's obviously a big talking point. Everyone's always asking, Trent played in the midfield in the academy, and whether it was wide midfielder or central midfielder, I think he's always been someone who's been touted to have the ability to do so. And I believe that if he was to make that shift, he would be successful. But my biggest question point is always, why would you do that? Why would you move, one of the best right backs in the world into midfield? I don't think there's any need to, displace him in the squad. For a start, we don't have another right back that can take that position. I think, if you move him, the creativity from out wide, it, then becomes lackluster there, and it's just about finding balance. But my biggest question when people always ask that is, what would you achieve from moving him into central midfield when he's already the most influential player in our attack from right back?
I mean, there's certainly questions that have got to been asked, and you do need a new rejuvenated midfield either in this window or the next one. Otherwise, like you said, Liverpool will start to fall behind. But ideally, if you were on the board, who would you want to see in that Liverpool midfield?
Obviously, the big name is Jude Bellingham. It's every single club in world football has got their eyes on him, and Liverpool have got us, conjure up some sort of elusive package for him. And without Champions League football, it's going to be very difficult. So there's, you've got to look at it from a few different perspectives. The realistic options of perhaps Matheus Nunes from Wolves, a player we did look at in the summer, but I think now we've sort of sparked and reignited that interest. But again, we're going to pay a premium now, 6 months on, having missed out on that opportunity. So I think Jude Bellingham, Matheus Nunes, there's obviously links to Sofian Amrabat. But it's getting to the point now where it's almost like I will take almost any top-level midfielder there. It's almost like plugging a hole at this point. It's bleeding out, and we just need some sort of bandage to cover it at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, Liverpool haven't really been the same since Gerrard left, in a sense. So I guess that kind of brings us quite nicely on to this week's episode of Start, Sub, Sell, where our three players are Steven Gerrard, Frank Lampard, and Paul Scholes. So Owen, if you want to start, I think I know your answer to this one already, but who would you start, who would you sub, and who would you sell?
Well, I think it goes in that order. Gerrard starts, Lampard sits on the bench, and the man from Manchester United can go elsewhere. I think personally, I don't think controversial or not, I don't think Scholes belongs in that debate anyhow.
No, I think Luke's answer might be a little bit different.
Yeah, I mean, obviously for me, it has to be Lampard has to start. The other two positions are kind of. Do you know what? It's for me. It really depends, because if I was building a squad for Barcelona under Pep Guardiola, then I would be keeping Scholes and I'd be getting rid of Gerrard. I think for me, Lampard has to stay because he adds something that the other two just don't have, which is that in the box instinct. It's that if you need a goal, he's the most likely to get it. I'm not saying that Gerrard and Scholes can't win you games with their goals, particularly Gerrard in an instance, because if Gerrard's up for it, he's almost unplayable. And I think when he is in the mood, he is a better player than Lampard. I just think it's his killer instinct of finding a nose for goal from an 8 position and not even really a 10 at most times I don't think it's going to come along in the same way for a very long time. So for me, yeah, it's easy to start Lampard. But for the other two, I think personal preference would be, I'd say keep Gerrard on the bench and then sell Scholes, similar to Owen. But I think you have to really understand what fundamentally do you want from your midfielder. If you want someone that's going to have time on the ball and is playing, as I say, in the tiki-taka team, then Paul Scholes is your man. Xavi and Iniesta have both said he's one of the best midfielders they've ever come up against.
I think you got it bang on there, to be fair, haven't you? I mean, I would still lean more towards what Owen said with starting Gerrard, but I would actually choose Scholes as my sub and bin off Lampard, because Gerrard is undoubtedly one of the best midfielders of the past generation. You can't dispute that. And like you said, Scholes has got that technical ability that allows him to slot into pretty much any team and offer something different. Whereas I don't think personally Lampard brings that.
How many midfielders can have 20 goal seasons?
But is that what you want from a midfielder? It depends what you need in the team, really, isn't it?
Goals win games. If someone said to you, do you want a midfielder that can score 20 goals across all competitions, pretty much the entirety of his career, you're not gonna say no, are you? You're not gonna say, oh well, we did get a really good attempt on goal because Scholes pinged it 50 yards across the pitch, but then the striker mucked it up. You're not gonna say that, are you?
Well, I suppose being a Chelsea fan, you're probably not used to having strikers that can score goals, so you've got to rely on those midfielders.
Okay. We're talking about 3 retired players, and it comes back to Chelsea's current form. That's great. That's fine.
Here, I'm probably not the most educated to talk, but from what I've seen, I think Gerrard starts. And I think for me, my limited YouTube highlights, Scholes is probably the one that I would bin off, which, internally is Lampard as a sub, but I'm not going to spend too long on it because I'll just be waffling.
Well, we can put it back to you, Lucas. Who do you think's the best pundit? Out of the 3 of them. They've all done it. They've all been on BT Sport at some point.
Gerrard, probably.
So I'm going to go out there and disagree. I think Scholes. Brilliant pundit.
I'll agree that. I didn't like him. I don't rate him as a player that highly, but as a pundit, he is pretty enjoyable.
He offers a different insight, really, doesn't he?
I think, yeah, it's very clear he understands the game to the nth degree. But I just, it's the same I have with Souness and Keane. I think it's too negative. Like, for me, my favourite pundit is Micah Richards because he's just a breath of fresh air. Like, yes, he maybe doesn't have the tactical knowledge that these high-level midfielders have, but it's really really refreshing to see someone big up someone for doing something well, rather than just having a go at someone who hasn't done their job correctly. And I think there's a bit of a narrative in that sense anyway, and just kind of punditry in England, because you look at other countries, all they do is talk about is how well someone has done, rather than focusing on what the defender or the midfielder should have done, or when he should have played the ball, or how he should have struck the ball. Like it, I think it's quite interesting to look at that. We sort of champion constructive criticism in our journalism, rather than just enjoying the highlights.
So moving on a little bit towards this weekend's fixtures, there's some big games coming up that could really decide European spots, or even go a long way towards deciding the league at the end of the season. I mean, City have got Spurs on Thursday. What do we sort of predict happening with that? Because Spurs are out of form under Conte, the football's not enjoyable to watch, and City seem a little bit low on confidence at the moment. Could Spurs get a shock result there and send City even further down the league?
No, personally, I think this could be the game that Haaland ends up with 5 goals. If he's got Eric Dyer as a central defender, this will be the game that he really takes him to town. Like I watched Spurs in the North London derby at the weekend, and I mean Lucas can tell us more about that, I imagine, but they were woeful. They were so bad. Like, I mean, Lloris had a shocker, I understand that, and the first goal was probably not expected, but it was you never felt like Arsenal weren't going to win. And that's really funny when you think that, was it 2014 was the last time they'd won away at Spurs? And I look at it and I go, this reminds me so much of the Conte style coming towards the end of his time at Chelsea. The only difference being he actually won the league when he was our manager, and at Spurs he hasn't even managed to get anywhere near it. So it's really, really interesting, because on paper you'd actually say their team is really quite good, but they're just not firing. Heung-min Son looks like a shadow of his former self. Harry Kane gets isolated week in, week out, and then he makes interesting decisions like playing Sessegnon over Perisic when he's just not up to it for that level.
Yeah, I mean, this weekend as well, we've got Liverpool, Chelsea, and Arsenal versus United. Two quite big games, big teams, but also big for the standings at the end of the season. Owen and Luke, I'll let you debate, Liverpool versus Chelsea. What's going to happen in that one?
0-0.
It's going to be the battle of the. Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised. I think it's going to be the battle of the woeful midfields. Really, I don't think either team are particularly confident going into the game. I think Liverpool have lost their last 2. Chelsea have lost the last 8 now.
Well, we've currently got our form is currently 1 win, so let's keep that in mind. But yeah, prior to that, yeah, it was.
Okay, apologies. It's not really got the excitement as previous years of the Chelsea-Liverpool fixture. I think the quality in that game is usually quite high. Obviously, last season we saw both teams get to both of the domestic cup finals, and luckily Liverpool came out on top both times. Just thought I'd remind you of that, Luke. But
penalties are a lottery.
Well, when you got the winning ticket all the time, then it doesn't really matter, does it? But no, I think it's going to be very important for our league positions. Both of us sort of trying to stay there or thereabouts with the European chase, and it's going to be a really close game. And like you said, if it's 0-0, I would not be surprised whatsoever.
It doesn't define the season for the manager, but the thing they both want to avoid is another defeat, because it instantly heaps the pressure on. Especially, I mean, from Liverpool's perspective, coming off of that loss to Brighton, it's not a good trend for either club at the moment. They just don't really know how they're setting up. It's quite clear that methods that were in place in the past aren't resulting in good football at the moment for both teams. And I think it could be really, really kind of cagey game. But a lack of quality I could kind of see in it. But I don't want to be too negative in a sense about it, because, as you say, they can and usually end up being quite exciting fixtures. So who knows? We could see a hatful of goals. But I think I have to kind of put my logical hat on and say that I think both managers would rather not lose than try and strive for a win and get a defeat. Do you know what I mean? I think it's going to be, for them, a point is explainable to a fan base rather than a drubbing, because you tried to go for it and it didn't work.
Yeah, absolutely. And then Arsenal United on Sunday in the later kickoff. Lucas, predictions for that one?
I'm excited for it, and I think United will go for it, which I think maybe benefits us more. Our defence has been really good this season. I think Newcastle's the only team with the better defence than us, but our our two draws this season have been the referee at St Mary's and Newcastle at home, and both of them just parked the bus for the full 80 minutes. And with Man United actually giving us a go, I think we could see a fair few goals in this one. I think it'll be around 2-2. I can't see us winning, but I can't see either team winning. I think Man United will get at least a point though, and then be the team that we didn't beat this season.
And that's the thing as well. Eric Ten Hag's work at United has kind of gone under the radar, hasn't it? Because it's been overshadowed by Ronaldo leaving and Casemiro coming in for the paycheck. But really, he's doing a brilliant job that deserves a lot more credit than what it is getting. I mean, that team last season was struggling. They finished 6th, 9 points behind Arsenal in 5th. But now they're up there challenging for the title. It's been a superb turnaround under Ten Hag. And if he gets the backing in the summer, you can see them really challenging for the title again next season.
Yeah. I just want to interject there, though. Can anyone tell me what month it is?
It is January. Transfer window.
Yeah, so no one wins the title in January, do they?
No, they don't.
So all this talk, all this nonsense about Newcastle, Man United challenging for the title, let's be real. Like, the only team realistically that I can see keeping themselves in the top 4 is Man City. They would be the most surprising team for me to drop out. Arsenal, I still think they're playing great football. And I would be very surprised if they weren't to keep the title challenge going. But they haven't, as you say, you've only got Zinchenko and Jesus that have won the title in the squad. So you're looking at a point of, yes, they really know what they're doing. They're a cohesive unit, but I as you say, 3 losses, it's not unheard of. It would take a lot, and I think momentum is definitely with them. But we can't be settling the title in January, can we? Surely not. Which is making it really interesting, though. It is.
I mean, the last couple of seasons, we've seen a 2-way title race coming towards the end, and we've seen Liverpool lose out by a point on a couple of occasions. But having so many teams still in it or still up there challenging at this point really does make it a lot more interesting than we've seen over the last 5 or 6 years.
I think, Gary Neville said last night, I think on Sky Sports, he said that it feels like more of a traditional season. Feels like more of a throwback season where there are 4 or 5 teams in it. Still gone past Christmas now. The top 4 is nowhere near decided, which is in past seasons, like you said, the top 2 have sort of pulled away, and then the rest are just sort of left to fight for themselves. So I think it's very good for the Premier League, and it's even though Liverpool are awful this season, it's still an enjoyable league to watch because of the talent level, across the board.
I want early predictions. We'll come back to this at the end of the season. Who is going to win it?
I think Arsenal have to win it. I think they have to.
It's theirs to lose, isn't it? It really is. It's got to be Arsenal.
It's difficult because obviously City this time last year were 14 points clear of Liverpool and got pushed to the last day. So, like Luke said, titles aren't decided in January. But I think the way that Arsenal have been playing, they've got so many doubters, and week in, week out, are they going to do it this week? Are they going to do it this week? And they do. Every single week they do it. And the first week was the first half, yesterday was a complete flip script yesterday in the second half, where they almost had to sit back and defend that lead. And to see a team be able to do both is extremely impressive. And I think this Arsenal team can really win the league. 20 games left, yes, long way to go, but I think it's theirs to lose.
It's the dynamic of the season is really interesting because of the World Cup interruption. I think that we've seen how many injuries it's caused different squads, and I still have to go with my head and say City, because they, as I say, the experience means so much. I mean, it is interesting seeing Arsenal at the top, and it pains me as much as I have to say that, but it's refreshing. Like I'll always argue the point of it's funny to see your rivals not doing very well, but it's always much more rewarding to win a derby when both teams are performing at their best. So I have to commend Arsenal because they've stuck with their manager, which is something hopefully my club will do, just to see if it's worthwhile. Because chopping and changing it, yes, it gives you short-term success, but does it give you long-term sustainability? Clearly not. So yeah, you have to commend Arsenal on it, and they look when they're playing and they're on song, they are breathtaking. And I think even in footballing terms, they have been the best performing team. Even probably arguably Newcastle being second to that in terms of how they've played, how they've gone about their matches, and how they've just come up against what's in front of it and dealt with that issue. But yeah, I just think City. There's something about it. I think the way that Pep will write it off and say they're not in the title race, they're just focusing on the competitions that they are in the FA Cup and the Champions League. I just think there's more to it than meets the eye. That he really, really does want to usurp his former apprentice, and I think they will. I think they will.
Lucas, what's your thoughts? I mean, try not to be biased, but
I really want to be biased, because this could be used against me, but I think it depends what Arsenal do in the other competitions for me. If they go for the FA Cup and the Europa League, I can't see it happening. We don't have the squad depth. I mean, El Neni got injured in the warm-up yesterday, and goodness knows what would have happened if Partey got injured. But, if we can't even replace man for man at some points, then I can't see us going far in all three competitions. But if we drop out of even just one of them, I can see it happening. But as Luke said, Pep has just got the experience, so have all of the City players. So I think City will nick it. But then who knows next season, maybe Arsenal and Man United could come knocking. Chelsea might win the championship, so who knows.
It's really, really, as you said, like refreshing to see some different teams pushing at the top, and to see teams that in the past have been doing well, not doing so well. But it's cyclical, isn't it? Like football was always like this. I think you can extrapolate it all the way back to the start of kind of football in this country. I think every 20 years or so, there's almost like a rotation of who's doing what. But yeah, I think you're right. If Arsenal don't do it this season, I have kind of no doubt in my mind that they will in the next 5 years as an absolute minimum, I think, because there's too much going right behind the scenes now. I think even with the Mudryk deal, they've clearly made their stance. They had a price they were going to pay. They didn't want to pay any more than that, and they're happy to take that on the chin that they lost out. And I think even with Nketiah, there was all this talk about they needed another centre forward to come in because he wouldn't be good enough. I would argue that even if Jesus comes back and is fully fit, Nketiah hasn't done badly enough to be replaced. I think Jesus is probably on paper, when in form, the better player, but you've got to kind of stick with the team that's winning. And yeah, I do think that for a squad so young and so together, they just need a few maybe more additions in on the bench to come off and to maybe make an impact. But then you never know. You've got your players like Marquinhos, the tricky winger that I've seen a couple of times in the Europa League, and he looks like he could be really good going forward. Martinelli has come into like completely into his own, and he's still very, very young as well. And not to mention Saka, Odegaard, the team. I think you have to look enviously at how well set up that team is to move forward into the future, as any fan in the league. But I just think, as I say, I think City will use in the short term their experience, their nous. They've got they've got 2 games, haven't they, left kind of against Arsenal that can really make a difference. And I think the FA Cup game, as you say, the way that ends up going will really help decide who's going to push on for the title.
It's got to be Arsenal. It has to be, doesn't it? I mean, 8 points clear in January. Yes, there is still half the season to go, but with what we've seen from City recently, they've dropped off it. The football is nowhere near as good as what we would expect from a Pep side. And I think really a lot of it will come down to when Arsenal play Man City in that rearranged fixture, because they've still got to play them twice. And if City win both of those, that's 6 points. The gap's down to 2. So I think until we've had maybe that first rearranged fixture played again, I think that's a point when we can really say, okay, these are the favourites.
well, you can keep your fingers crossed for next year as well. I mean, last time Leicester were in a relegation battle, they won it next year. So who knows? Who knows?
Yeah, I mean, with Brendan in charge, I don't think that'll be happening, but we can hope.
Brendan's at the wheel.
Yeah, he just hasn't passed his test yet. Feels like he's playing bumper carts at sometimes.
Well, hopefully he can crash his way into some sort of survival, because I think Leicester's too big a club now to be going down, really.
Absolutely, it's got to be, hasn't it? And if we do fall into the relegation zone, then there's got to be questions being asked. Do you know what I mean? I know West Ham are down there at the moment, and you know, your stereotypically big teams like Everton, but it's not a place where, based on recent form, Leicester belong.
It's interesting though. You put that point out. Like, I agree. I think they're too good. They're too big at the moment, and the recent history would say they're too big to be going down. But I'm just having a think now. How many players from Leicester do you think would immediately go to another club if you were relegated?
Oh, the majority.
I don't know. I mean, you've got obviously James Maddison. I think is a shoo-in. I think he could play for any team, really. Have a place in any team. But like Danny Ward, I don't think is a worrying net. I think Jamie Vardy, I don't think people would put a punt on him now. I don't think he's the same player.
I think in the Championship, maybe he could still do a job as an out striker, but the pace isn't there anymore. Do you know what I mean? He is literally a goal scorer, and that's it. And he struggles to do that at the best of times now.
And I think Tielemans doesn't want to be there, does he? Really? It's made that very clear. Yeah. And I just think, yeah, you're. What's your opinion on Soyuncu? What do you think's gone on there?
Apparently, what it is there's been a bit of an argument between him and Brendan Rodgers. Brendan doesn't want to play him. Soyuncu wants to leave, but the club isn't accepting an offer because it's not enough. He's linked with Atletico Madrid at the moment, though, which is a bit of an interesting move. But I hope it works out for him. Do you know what I mean? He's not getting used here. He's on the wage bill, taking up an absolute fortune. And that's the reason we can't sign anyone, because we're going to fall foul of FFP rules. So if he wants to sod off, he can sod off. Do you know what I mean? We got enough. I would say we got enough capable defenders, but we don't, because Vestergaard's useless. Bertrand's on 80 grand a week, played 11 times. He hasn't played since Boxing Day 2021. It's strange. But I think if we go down to the Championship, it's going to be a worry.
This is what I mean, though. This is what I mean. Because I think you look at the squad and you think they're too good to go down. But then when you really beat into it, what other clubs would take some of the players that you're starting every week?
Yeah,
and there is probably only about four or five. And yes, I know that's still that's a spine of a team. But you can see, I think it's similar. It is similar with when you look at your Evertons and your West Hams.
Yeah.
You think they should be doing better than they are. But really, when you go down with it with a fine-tooth comb, how good is the whole team? Like Antonio isn't as good as he once was for West Ham. Declan Rice he's putting in performances, but he isn't. It's not the same drive as when Mark Noble's still there. He's not the overall club captain. It's when he knows his head is turned. I think he was just kind of keeping himself going, keeping himself in the shop window. I mean, he's now been linked with a summer move to Arsenal. So I mean, there's a lot of potential for that whole team to be ripped apart anyway. I mean, Lucas Paqueta, yes, phenomenal talent, but he hasn't really shown it enough in the matches. And there's always this argument, again, with David Moyes. I think he wants to rebrand West Ham and make them a team that everyone worries about every time they play them. They're not just they're strong in the tackle. They'll cause problems. Yeah. He wants them to influence and create a style of football. But when he had that task at Man United, I know he wasn't necessarily backed as much as he would have liked to have been. It wasn't very clear how they were going to create and be influential in those sorts of games. I think they lose that element of going back and just sticking it long and getting Souček to get his head on it in the box and someone tap it in. I think that you really sort of sometimes have to really make the football simple and just kind of stick to what you're good at. And sometimes you can overcomplicate it. And then that is when you really get found out. The players aren't maybe as good as you think they are.